Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Mike Wakeman, the chair of the Guild of Health Writers, and I'd like to welcome you all to this event this morning, Children's Mental Health, What Can Be Done to Help. So the event is being chaired by Professor Sir Sam Everington, who's a member of the BMA Council and Vice President of the BMA. He's a GP and chair of Tower Hamlets CCG and clinical lead in sustainability and transformation partnerships. And I think a lot of you will be familiar with his work in terms of social prescribing. He's been a thought leader in social prescribing for a number of years now. He's also a member of the College of Medicine, and one of the initiatives that Sam's trying to drive through, as I'm sure we'll talk about later, is having a nurse within every school in the country to help to support physical, mental and social health within schools. And I mean, Sam will no doubt pick up on this, but it seems as though the numbers of school nurses have fallen significantly in the last decade. We're also joined by PlaceToBe. We've got Catherine Rush, who's the Chief Executive of PlaceToBe, Judah Rackham, who is a qualified counsellor and family programme lead at PlaceToBe. And then we also have Hayley, a mother whose daughter was supported by PlaceToBe when she was at primary school, who's going to talk about her personal experiences and engagement with PlaceToBe. I think a lot of you will be familiar with PlaceToBe. We've certainly had an engagement before, but it's worth reminding people that PlaceToBe is over 25 years old now, and there's been supporting parents and children in this sort of environment for a number of years. And one of the interesting things when I was looking at your website, Catherine, was the fact that you said one-to-one sessions could produce a lifetime cost saving, a net return on investment of 600%. Because of the projected avoidance of long-term mental health problems. And I think that's been brought into focus today by the Quality Watch report, which was issued at the weekend, looking at the increase in mental health issues that have occurred during the pandemic. So I'm now going to pass over to Sam so that he can lead the event. So thank you, Sam.
Okay, welcome everybody. I think we go straight into the event and start with our first speaker, Catherine Rush. Catherine.
Great, thanks very much, Mike and Sam. I'm delighted to be here this morning. So as Mike said, PlaceToBe has been working, is a professional mental health service provider. We have been working embedded in schools now for almost 28 years in local school communities right around the country. And we absolutely believe in early intervention and seeking to address mental health problems before they escalate, and to get in as early as we can in the life of the problem and in the life of a child. And the driver for that is we know that 50% of adult mental health problems can be identified before the age of 14 and can be addressed. And so from there really comes by providing that support early, embedded in the school life where a child is. From there can come, and through the analysis of our outcomes, we show the savings that Mike referred to from that study, which was conducted by Pro Bono Economics on PlaceToBe's work and on the outcomes from our targeted work in schools. So what we really believe in is a mental health service embedded as part of accessible services within the school, just like Sam was talking earlier about having a school nurse or a health professional embedded in school life. That essentially is what PlaceToBe does in primary schools and in secondary schools. We believe in what we call the whole school approach, which is a phrase that I'm delighted is increasingly recognized, and we increasingly hear when we talk about the education system. But I think we're at the early stages of that being embedded nationally, which is what we really, really need. And the whole school approach is about identifying and addressing mental health problems early on. So at one end, it's addressing the problems, but really importantly, at the other end, it's about promoting positive mental health and well-being. And we know from our work across school communities, so now almost 450 school communities across the UK, that children will access this and that it can deliver a real impact when it is provided as part of a natural school system. This requires work and support. It requires leadership. I think that's the important thing, leadership at a school level from the head teacher, but also the governing body to really understand what mental health is and how this is an integral part of a child's development, and how it can, when a child doesn't have good mental health, that this can introduce barriers to a child being able to engage in their learning. It also involves work with the staff in the schools, so class teachers understanding children's behaviour and what lies behind behaviour, along with what they can do in their role as class teachers, and then also being able to refer a child or identify a child for additional support when they need it. And really importantly, and we're going to hear much more about this aspect from Judah and also from Hayley, this involves engagement and support for parents, because especially when we get in earlier, there's so much that we can do as parents ourselves, but it's also so important within the school that all the adults around a child are really, if you like, joined up and they're in support of the child and in tune with each other. And so from our work, we know that we can have a real positive impact, and it can lead to improved outcomes in terms of a child's engagement in learning, in terms of a child's academic progress, in terms of a child's mental health and well-being, in terms of the impact on exclusions within a school. We've seen from our work that there are 75% fewer exclusions in school from children who are at risk of school exclusion when they have access targeted mental health support. And we also know in terms of a child's ability to make friends, to engage in all those positive pro-social factors, a child's ability to engage with others and make friends and keep friends, that all of these things are improved. As part, and then in addition, within our work, we have undertaken a significant amount through this last 18 months to really extend the reach and broaden out the numbers of schools that we can support and reach particularly through online means. And if anything, I think that's one of the positive things, that we've all become more used to using technology and can use it to effectively share services and share expertise. And we have rolled out an online program for class teachers. We're running a program for mental health leads in schools, addressing that high-level mental health, the mental health lead within a school. And Judah will talk more about the support that we're providing for parents online. So it is possible. We know this is possible, and that there is much that we can do. This is also a time when I think there's a real challenge. We hear almost daily in the press, and Mike just referred to yet another report highlighting some of the issues that we've seen as we come out of COVID and into a recovery period. There have been significant issues and repeated studies, whether it's from the Office of the Children's Commissioner, whether it's our own study that we did with head teachers just 2 weeks ago for Children's Mental Health Week, where we heard that around 25% of schools can access the specialist support when it's needed. So there's a real issue in terms of the ability to refer into specialist services when it's needed. So there is an investment required there, but equally, we need to focus on an investment within the school system and having an embedded practitioner within a school to address issues early on. So I think I will pause there, Sam.
Yeah, Catherine, before we go on to Judah, just a quick question. So demand on services during COVID, up or down? What was your experience?
Astronomical increase. It's of the order of 80%, I think Mike quoted 80%. So it's particularly in areas such as self-harm, eating difficulties is one of the severe areas. And in our work in secondary schools, this is also, we've also seen this across the school communities, and sadly also in terms of suicidal thoughts. So some really severe issues in the secondary school end of the spectrum, and then also for primary schools, just increased anxiety, worry, and challenging behavior also, where we may not have seen children coming into school and learning social skills, which are so important, especially in that very early age group.
And you mentioned school exclusion. Has that gone up or down? And do you have any views on the Glasgow project, which reduced knife crime to 40%, of which the vast majority of the public health initiative was around stopping school exclusion?
I haven't got stats in terms of school exclusions during this COVID period or post-COVID. I think it's been such a disrupted period within schools. So schools are trying to get back into some sort of familiar pattern. Without a doubt, joining up services. We know children who are excluded from schools. That again, this relates to the pro bono economic report. The trajectory for children when they are excluded from schools is, you know, just a really challenging negative downward spiral in the main. So by addressing some of those issues, keeping children in schools, getting the support in to understand what's driving their behavior is just so important.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Catherine. Judah, over to you.
The family program leader at PlaceToBe, and a lot of my work has been around developing the parenting offer that we now are able to provide for parents within PlaceToBe schools, but also it stretches wider than that. So, I mean, first of all, our resources for parents start online with our Parenting Smart website, which is a free website which has been developed over the last few years, which covers a lot of themes for parents, essentially, lots of information and advice and guidance around common parenting themes. I think as a parent myself, you know, one of the things around when you're working with your child and some certain situations come up is not knowing what advice to follow. What Parenting Smart does is it gives parents a really good, consistent, clear kind of idea about some of the things they might want to think about when they're, you know, coming up against a certain issue with their child. You know, their child might be presented with anxiety, for example. There's articles on that. There's things around meal times. There's things around sleep and bedtimes and things like that. So it's just general common parenting themes that we all at times need help to kind of get some advice around. So Parenting Smart has a range of those topics for parents to look at. I mean, at the moment, since it was launched last year, October, we've had over 22,000 people that have actually visited the site, and it's available not just in the UK, it's available worldwide. And so, you know, that's a free website that is promoted to all parents, whether they are in PlaceToBe schools or not. So that's the first kind of universal element of support that we've developed, and I've been a part of helping with some of that. And then also we have a parenting course which we've now launched online. It actually is launched this week, so today is the first day of the launch. Have over 460 parents that have registered, which is really great. And this gives parents a chance to go through some specific parenting themes over 7 weeks, but in an online way with an online community, and a way of them talking through issues that, you know, are all common to parents around, number one, making your relationships with your children better, which is always the first place to start when thinking about behavioural issues with kids anyway. And then also, what are specific tools that would help improve and, you know, help parents to manage challenging situations with their children. So there's 6 themes that are covered over that course, which covers over 7 weeks. And there's an online facilitator. So one of our family practitioners, which I'll talk a bit about more in a minute, they also moderate the course online. So the parents not only have a community where they can post online and respond to the topics and talk about the things that they're learning through that course on those weeks, but they also have someone that they can interact with who's a live person, a real person, which can kind of give them answers to questions, respond to their comments, encourage them. And that's around them staying engaged with the course as well, because I mean, from delivering a lot of parenting courses over many years that I've done, one of the biggest things around parenting courses is the sense of how to stay engaged, how parents can stay engaged with it. And it is around how you engage with someone that's helping you to go through the course that makes a big difference. So we're hoping that that will be a really unique element to having an online course, because there are some online courses, you know, by other developers of parenting courses, but they don't usually have this element where there's somebody online that you can speak to. So, you know, that's part of our online offer, which is a universal offer, but it's only available to parents that are within PlaceToBe schools. So, you know, we're going to see how that goes over the next few months and really learn from that as the process goes on. And then our targeted offer is more within the school. So like I mentioned, the family practitioner role, there are family practitioners which are now working within all PlaceToBe schools. And what they do is, you know, specific work with parents, supporting the parents within that school community from a point of view of being a place to talk to about signposting, to if the parent needs to talk about general issues, you know, family practitioners will meet with a parent, talk to them about things that they might want to consider, or give them ideas about where they can be signposted to. You know, some of the support services in an area for parents, you know, they might not even know some of those. And I think that's a really key issue about, again, speaking as a parent, I might not always know what is available within my area. I might not always know that there is something that I can be signposted to. So family practitioners are there to help with that kind of process and help to talk through things like that with parents. But then also they offer a more targeted intervention, something called PIPT, which is personalized individual parent training. And those sessions, up to 10 sessions that a parent can have with a family practitioner, are dyadic sessions where they have their child in the room with them and they receive live coaching with that parent and child, you know, to help to improve their interactions, so improve the interactions between the parent and child, but also for the parent to start to think about how they can, you know, manage situations with their child which are more related to the child's behavior, but that it's all through the way that that child interacts with them in the moment, in that session, that helps to kind of develop those responses. So one of the things that we know research with parenting is that if parents can, you know, attend and respond sensitively to certain situations with their children, actually that's what shapes behavior, that's what makes behavior shaped in the more positive way. It's all around parental attention and interaction and the sensitivity of responses, and that's what the coaching, the live coaching, is about, is helping parents to become more aware of that, but not from a point of view of saying that parents don't know this stuff already. It's actually more making them more aware of what they're doing in the moment. Because actually as parents, we do many things out of awareness with our kids, but within PIT, what happens is you get a chance to actually get some awareness that, okay, so when I do this with my child in this moment, this is the reaction I get. And the practitioner feeds that back, you know, gives the parent reinforcement and praise and encouragement about what they're doing, which is also really valuable because parents don't always get that voice of encouragement coming at them from somewhere to say, actually, what you're doing is great. And actually what you're doing is really helping your child. So they get a lot of that through that targeted intervention. So, you know, that's the more targeted element of our parenting offer, which, you know, PlaceToBe schools can access, but obviously that parent has to be referred in by the PlaceToBe school. So that's the kind of high end of it. But as I said, there's more of a range of support that we offer across the board within PlaceToBe schools, because actually, you know, we see parents as the most primary agents of change. Actually, me with my child, you know, I am the expert on my child. As parents, all parents are experts with their children. And so that means that I am the primary agent of change with my child. If there's going to be anything that improves my child's way of being within school or outside of school, it's going to be about what I can do as a parent. And we really want to empower parents with that message, to let them know that, you know, no matter what tools we might be offering, parents remain the experts about their child, and they remain the people that make the biggest difference in their child's life, especially when they work in conjunction with the school community and with school staff, etc. So there's a really big key element around that. So that's generally the kind of offer that we have. You know, hopefully over time we will learn more and more about what parents take from receiving that offer in terms of evaluating our services and saying, you know, this was really helpful, or these things still need to be kind of improved. But yeah, it's a learning process that we're going through around how we can offer a real, you know, tailored but helpful offer for parents that really they can engage with and take something from to, you know, make changes with themselves and their families.
Judah, thank you so much. What a great service. Pity we don't have it in every school in the country. Should we go straight on actually to Hayley, and then we can get to the questions from all the other writers. Hayley, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Good morning, everyone. My name's Hayley Vandenberg, and I've got two children, but it's my eldest child. She's currently in year 9 at secondary school. It was towards the end of year 4 that we started noticing changes in her behavior. It was, her teacher pointed out that she would do work, which was correct, her maths or whatever, and then he would notice that her head would be down. He'd go across and she'd scrubbed out the work completely with a pencil, sometimes ripping the page, and she'd be crying, absolutely silent tears. But he became rather concerned about it. We started noticing them at home as well. It was almost like a complete shutdown. She would just disappear. And no matter what you said or what you did, you couldn't bring her back to you. She had to come out of it in her own time. When we asked her to describe what she was going through, she used quite a lovely metaphor where she said that she felt like she was a jacket potato boiling in water. And even if as water cooled around her, the heat remained inside. So she felt this ball of stress that she couldn't deal with. So the teacher had a word with us, and we spoke to the PlaceToBe manager at the school, and Hannah was referred for a year's counselling with PlaceToBe. Throughout this counselling, she said that it really helped her because she was taught strategies on how to deal with the stress. As the stress became apparent in her work, it was they taught her sort of different breathing techniques, how to count in certain ways that would just lower her stress levels. Her teacher also put in a number of interventions. He gave her these little, they're almost like little bricks. He gave her a yellow brick and a red brick. And when she was on the verge of having an issue, she put the yellow brick in and said, I'm sliding down the hill, please help me. If she put the red brick, he knew he had to get her out of the classroom immediately before she completely shut down. Over the period of the counselling, we noticed that she was starting to come back to the beautiful, confident child we had before. We actually don't know why this happened. We don't know why the stress happened, the mental health crisis happened. We don't know. It just came on. We don't know if it was a result of work at school just getting too much or disruptive children in her class. There was never a clear answer. There were no problems at home at all. She comes from a stable home. But gradually we got our Hannah back. It took most of the year with the counselling with PlaceToBe, and then she moved into year 6 and she had to have her SATs, and she was a bit wobbly at times, but she would just revert back to what she'd been taught. The biggest concern for us as a family is that we knew how close to the brink she was. Catherine spoke about suicidal tendencies, self-harming tendencies, things like that. We did feel at times, there were times when Hannah was considering self-harm. She never spoke about suicidal thoughts, but we know how close to the brink she was. And as I've said to Catherine, and I've said to many others from PlaceToBe and other people, had it not been for the intervention at the time, had it not been for the care, the consideration, the counselling, and the follow-up with myself and my husband through PlaceToBe, we don't know where we would be today. I mean, she's in secondary school now. The pressures are so much more. She's approaching her GCSE years, and as I was saying, she came home from an assessment just before the half term, and she said, I felt a bit stressed today, but I remembered what my counsellor taught me, and I used those techniques, and I got through the assessment. So so grateful that PlaceToBe was actually in the school. And when she went to secondary school, and I mentioned that she'd had the PlaceToBe counselling, one of the teachers who interviewed us at the time said, oh, we don't have that here. It's a primary school thing. So I said to her, no, it's not a primary school thing. It's a whole school initiative. And I really think it should come into secondary schools, because at secondary school level, Hannah has mentioned that a lot of her friends are, especially with COVID and the stresses that have come from there, and becoming teenagers as well. So I will always be grateful for what PlaceToBe did for us. And had it not been for the intervention, I don't know where we'd be today. Thank you.
Hayley, that's fantastic. And can you tell us a bit about your daughter's plans for her future? How does she see the future? What's she going to do? Is she thinking about being a health worker, a doctor or a nurse or whatever?
She actually is. She's talking about medicine, but now she's talking about maybe going into neurology. She likes the study of the brain. So I'm sure that she'll be great there. She came home, actually, I forgot, she came home at the end of September last year and actually said, oh, I've just signed up for the Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award. Now, the Hannah of year 5 and evidence and no confidence in anything to actually step up and do all the things that the Duke of Edinburgh demands of her, sort of volunteering and physical and the skills. So yeah, she's definitely wanting to go into medicine, but I'm sure whatever she chooses, she'll just.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hayley. Right, it's over to questions then. Do you want to just put your hand up on the Zoom hand system? Right, while we're waiting for questions, Catherine, self-harm in teenagers. There's a study, isn't there, by, I think it was the Royal College of Psychiatrists, that looked at something like 27% had thought about it, 15% had done it. And this is in teenage adolescents. Is that an increasing problem?
Absolutely, Sam, very definitely. And in our work in secondary schools, sadly, this is something that we're seeing a significant increase in. And I think the increase in anxiety and in just general deterioration of mental health problems and stress that we're seeing in teenagers, perhaps this is one of the reasons that we're seeing this coming through. And certainly from a safeguarding point of view, now as PlaceToBe is working in more and more secondary schools, this is, we're really alert to the safeguarding challenges and the need for increased safeguarding capacity, because it's so challenging. And then when you don't have access to the specialist services that are needed in these sorts of cases, that can be incredibly challenging and just stressful for everybody, for the family, for the young person, for the teachers and those around.
Danny, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks very much. And thanks very much for the presentations. A couple of questions. One, first one to Catherine. I think there was a figure at the start about something like the amount of economic savings that can be made by early interventions, plus the 50% of adult conditions can be traced back to under 14. So I wondered if you could unpack that a little bit, how that is worked out. Then also to Sam, about social prescribing. Is there a greater role that social prescribing can play in this?
Catherine.
Okay, so Danny, this is a study that Pro Bono Economics have done using the PlaceToBe outcomes data. So for our targeted work, so the work that Hayley described in the one-to-one counselling service, we've looked at the outcomes that we get in terms of improved mental health of children who access that service. And we know that around 80% of the children with the most with a higher level of need, who are at high risk of developing mental ill health and mental health problems, that they show improvement. So it's an 80%, if you like, success rate in terms of positive impact. We've looked at the cost of delivering the service, and then Pro Bono Economics have modeled that using wider data sets around the likely outcomes for those who are at risk and the cost of mental ill health. So when you enter, the proportion of, for example, school exclusions, smoking, deterioration in health, increased cost to the health system, and in terms of entering into a pupil referral unit, the cost of exclusion. When you factor all of those negative things, if you like, into it, you end up with a £1 cost, £1 investment to £6.20 return. And we have seen that return. As I say, Pro Bono Economics have done that study twice, and we're just in the process of doing it again for a third time, addressing some of the underlying assumptions around it, and it just comes out stronger and stronger and more consistent each time. We've also now factored in, is the positive impact of the service sustained over time? And it shows, we've again a study, an academic study undertaken that shows that a year on, the positive impact of the intervention is sustained. So it just makes economic sense.
Brilliant, thank you.
Danny, very quickly on social prescribing, absolutely yes. Look, the NHS, so we started social prescribing as GPs 30 years ago, put it in every practice in Tower Hamlets 10 years ago, and then persuaded government to put it in every practice in the country. And there are a few reasons for this. Firstly, you cannot even begin to tackle people's health problem if you just do traditional biomedicine. It just doesn't, it's not going to work. You have to deal with people's employment, their education, their environment, their creative and spiritual side. That is 80% of their health.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And we see this in the opioid addiction, you know, when you go down traditional biomedical approaches. The second thing is, I might see a child in teenage years, maybe once a year at the most for 10 minutes. The schools and parents, this is why PlaceToBe is so amazing, because it combines the two key elements in a child's life, schools and their parents, actually, to try and resolve this problem. Finally, just to say that as the College of Medicine, we're now doing a pilot of social prescribing in schools. We're doing it in 3 schools at the moment. We hope to publish at the end of the year. And we hope then to actually push for social prescribing in every single school in the country. PlaceToBe, fantastic work in 450 schools, I think you said, Catherine. But there's 24,000 schools in England alone. You know, this is a mammoth task and a mammoth role for social prescribing, which is what PlaceToBe is doing. We use the word social prescribing in medicine because doctors understand it. And I always said we called it that because it's a secret conspiracy to re-educate all doctors and nurses without them realizing what we're doing using their language. But PlaceToBe is exactly the same, and they will use different terminology. Louise, Roger.
Thank you.
Louise and then Mary Claire.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Louise.
It's Lois.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon.
So you said earlier, Catherine, that only 25% of schools have access to specialist support. Is that right?
We did a study in the lead up to Children's Mental Health Week with the National Association of Head Teachers, and it was, I think it was 24% of schools reported that they had access to specialist support when they needed it. So in theory, it's there for everyone in terms of being able to refer into CAMHS. But I think the challenges that we have within the system and the level of demand that's there, that if you're a head teacher with a young person who is in crisis, who needs specialist support, it's incredibly challenging to be able to access that in a timely way.
So what can we as journalists, or what can doctors and the mental health community in general do to improve awareness of this? I mean, I had no idea it was as limited as you're saying.
It is incredibly challenging. This is what all the stats and the report that Mike mentioned from this morning and the Children's Commissioner report, it is a real challenge. I think we need investment and focus on the mental health system, and specifically for children and young people. We do have the introduction of mental health support teams. So there is some work underway, but in terms of the scale of ambition and in terms of the pace of that, it needs to go beyond a quarter of the country by 2023. You know, all schools need to have access to the services that they need.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions which is really interesting is when you look at the allocation in the health service, and mental health included, by age, I get disproportionately invested in terms of my age group compared to the younger age group. And somebody needs to challenge that. Mary Claire.
Oh, hello. Thank you, everyone. It's a wonderful, fantastic session that you're flagging all this up. My question is, how many cases of trauma in children do you pick up? Or maybe you don't see it like that, but trauma is a huge issue. There's a big paper on it first time, I think it's about 3 years ago, in the Lancet about trauma in the community and young people, going back to childhood, was often not picked up at all. So I don't know if you've got any comment on that, Catherine.
Well, I might ask Judah, so who's closer to the practice and what some of the practitioners are seeing in our schools, because it's definitely part of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the work that goes on with family practitioners across the schools, I mean, lots of the children and their parents are, experiencing trauma, have experienced trauma, and actually that work that their family practitioner is doing with them, although it might be have a parenting focus, a behavior focus, there is also that impact of trauma that is being worked through as part of the intervention, and obviously not maybe in that specific way as you would, for specifically trying to help that person with their trauma, but in a sense addressing like parent-child relationships, for example, that might almost be trying to help repair some of the trauma that has happened previously in terms of what has damaged that relationship between the parent and child, and maybe even help with some of their attachments, which might have been not so close and not so secure due to family issues, due to things that they've experienced. There's high levels of domestic abuse, for example, across lots of family work, and that's kind of well documented. So we see that in our work, that whether or not it's domestic abuse in that sense, but there might even just be family and relationship issues that have impacted that family, in fact impacted that parent, and the way that the dynamics between them and their children, etc. So it definitely has a massive impact. And there's a research that's been done from many years ago called ACEs, which I'm sure you're aware of. And ACEs, in terms of the impact, those adverse childhood experiences for children, we see that in our work, and as the research says, if you've had 3 or 4 of those ACEs, it impacts you in major ways, which even goes through to your health conditions, doesn't it? And health problems later on in life. So we see that a lot, and the family practitioners' work is around trying to address the parts of that they can do through their work. Obviously, like I said, it's not in that more specific way of addressing direct trauma.
Thank you, Judah.
Judah, just building on that, it's just under 40% of the children that we see in our targeted one-to-one counselling have 4 or more ACEs, so 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. So there's complex situations and cases.
Thank you, Catherine. Cheers.
Hayley, can I come to you, because it begs the question, how do schools need to change? So if you could wave a magic wand, what would you want to see in every school for your daughter and for all the children in this country?
To be personally honest, looking at my eldest at the moment, I wish there was PlaceToBe in her school, because sometimes she'll come home with issues, and I remind her of what she'd gone through in primary school and the counselling she'd had and the strategies she got, and used those. And she says she wishes that they had, because in the primary school where she was, they also had Place to Talk, which is where it's the group of children sitting down and having a discussion. It could be friendship issues or something. And she just wishes that sometimes they had something like that. I think in an ideal world, PlaceToBe should be in every school in this country, because as Catherine said, the earlier you get in, the more successful the outcome is. Hannah got the intervention in beginning of year 5, so she was 9 years old. Had nothing been in the primary school here, I don't know where we'd be. personally. You know, we probably have to access CAMS. We know how overwhelmed CAMS is at the moment and how long referrals are taking. We had the lockdown, you know, that would have impacted upon her. So I think, and as a school governor at the school, I also see sometimes the staff, they might have an issue and they quickly go and see our PlaceToBe manager and just have a little one-to-one chat just to help themselves. I just think that mental health services, the earlier we can get in with children, the better it'll be for them. You know, we won't have teenage suicides on the scale we have today, the self-harming. You know, there's so much that we can do. And I know it's always about, do we have the money to put it in place? But, you know, I think in the great scheme of things, we should. But in an ideal world, I think it should happen in every school.
Great, thanks. Mary Claire, did you want to come back in again, or is that an old hand? You're on mute, Mary Claire.
It's an old hand. I just wanted to say thank you so much for that response on trauma. It's so important. Can I just say briefly, when I was looking more at this issue, which is everywhere, and a GP told me he saw a patient, a long-standing patient in his practice, who he then took this patient on. He hadn't seen her before. She was in her 20s. She had a history of depression. It was very strange. She couldn't make out what happened. They talked. And what it came out was, this is the first time it went back to her childhood, right to her childhood. She'd been abused by both parents. And that's when it came up a lot later. And it hadn't been, there was no way of picking it up. So I think this service is wonderful, because it's just starting to focus and getting to grips with all these things. And this massive silence, and this poor woman just didn't know what, she just tried to bury it, which is very typical. Yeah. Sorry.
Thanks very much. Karen. Karen Mockham.
All right, yes, just unmuting, thank you. Yeah, this is all really interesting. I work at the NHS website at the moment, as well as being a member of the Guild of Health Writers. And we are looking at what can be done to help signpost young people and their parents to services. And of course, you know, we're very aware that CAMS can be, the waiting time can be very long. But what we found from some of the young people we've spoken to is that they're not really told how long they're going to have to wait. So they will get a referral or promise of a referral, and then they feel as though they've been left hanging. And what sort of support or what signposting can be given to these young people while they wait to actually be assessed or to get professional help?
Who wants to answer that? Catherine?
Well, therein lies a bit of the gap, I think. That is the challenge that is in schools. So where a school, I think, if we try and look at what we can do and what there is. So some schools will have a counsellor. They might have somebody on site themselves. I know, for example, in the schools that have a PlaceToBe service, this is exactly the role where we can provide some holding support, if you like, or some form of check-in for young people whilst waiting to access a more specialist service. And there is also many clinical commissioning groups commission COOTH, which is an online service, because some young people actually will might not want to talk to somebody face to face. Some young people, who like to use a digital tool and use digital means, and are so familiar with that sort of service. So COOTH is commissioned by a lot of the vast majority of clinical commissioning groups in the country. So young people can access that. But I think it needs somebody to actually be familiar with what is available in an area and then be able to signpost and talk. And for parents and teachers to be on hand and alert, to be able to provide support whilst the young person is waiting. But we really don't want them to have to wait.
Well, I think that's what we've been hearing from some of the young people we've spoken to, that yes, the situation can be so different depending on which area you live in, what your CCG does provide, how overstretched CAMS might be locally. We've also heard from people who say they've had actually managed to get really good professional support, and it has genuinely made an impact and helped them. But then as they approach 18, the handover from young people's services to adult services seems to be really quite, from some of the experiences, just quite rushed and really disorientating, because they've been working maybe with someone for a couple of years and suddenly it's like, oh, this is our last session, you're going to be handed over to adult services. And I think that seems to be upsetting some of the people that we've spoken to. But I guess that's beyond the remit really of this session, what happens with adult services.
I'm aware from our colleagues at Young Minds also, who work much more in this area and who also have great online services and support as well. It's another really good source of information. That transition period again is very challenging, you know, from young person through to the adult services.
Heather, you're on mute, Heather.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I came in late because I couldn't get into the link, but I think it's great, all the stuff you're doing from what I've heard. And I wanted to introduce you to my children's book, which is about dealing with mental health in the very young, which is called Difficult Days for Dinosaur Douglas. And it was used by Hammersmith and Fulham Family Support to help children in Hammersmith and Fulham. So I just thought it would be great to send you a copy and just let you see what I've done and see if it's of any use for in your work, which is obviously amazing and getting right through to the problems and the children all over the countryside. So I hope you will allow me to send you a copy and we can maybe talk about it in some way. Is that okay?
Terrific, great, thank you, Heather. There is great, because there are great resources out there, and again, it's getting these into the hands of people who can use them is so important.
Yes, I realise that is the problem, to get them to the right people. But I have some really good reviews. It's written in rhyme and it's for the very young, and it's really just to get them talking. And I've been told that it is a very useful resource. So it would be interesting just to get some comments from you as to whether it is for you. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you.
Judah, we've talked earlier on about social exclusion and the connection with mental health. Have you found a connection with physical and mental health? Because certainly what I see as a GP is type 2 diabetes in teenagers. When I trained 40 years ago, it was a disease of the elderly. What are you seeing as the connection with physical health?
Yeah, I mean, when thinking about children and young people and their emotional well-being, there is this link between that and them being able to be physically active. One of the approaches around behaviour improvement is called PERMA, and it's about looking at not just the change of the child's specific behaviour in one context, but thinking about the whole environment and how the environment impacts how they feel and then how they then behave. And part of that is about physical activity. What do they do to help almost promote a feeling of well-being through being active. And I think it's one of the things that, especially when I used to work within health services, and we worked within more of an assessment centre for children with neurodevelopmental conditions. One of the parts of that package of behaviour support would be seen is what can we do in the community, help engage this child in the community in an active way, where they can take up an interest or do something that brings them some certain level of joy and feeling of purpose through doing some sort of activity. So I think there is a massive link between the two. I mean, even working as a therapist myself, talking to the idea of clients who come to me who more are suffering things like depression, there's an element around linking their level of activity to how they then feel each day and how they can lift their moods through levels of activity and doing things like that. So there is a definite connection. And I think for young people, when we think of the way that things have changed within the last couple of years, there has been this step away from being outside, enjoying the outdoors and going and doing walks and bike rides and playing football and things like this. So there's been this opposite move away from that kind of lifestyle. And I do think that has had a massive impact on then young people's general emotional well-being, where they've retreated into being isolated, being on more technology and just in front of a computer screen. It's not as helpful in terms of this feeling of emotional well-being, so we really want to encourage that part of the process for young people, alongside looking at other environmental changes that they could have, be made for them to help improve their situations, definitely.
And what about school meals and mental health?
School meals. Go on, Catherine.
Oh, well, I was going to say the Daily Mile springs to mind in terms of physical activity, and we've connected in with the Daily Mile around particularly our primary schools, which is just, brilliant initiative. And also Magic Breakfast. When you talk about school meals, I mean, Magic Breakfast is just, it's just such a fundamental for a child to come into school and then it just makes such sense. They've got to be nourished and fed before you can start to get on with the business of learning. So Magic Breakfast is a charity that does phenomenal work, also has fantastic impact data around their work. And actually we spoke at the Education Select Committee with Gus O'Donnell and Richard Layard during Children's Mental Health Week, and there he also highlighted the work that PBE have done on Magic Breakfast. So definitely we've got to feed children before they can sit down in a class and be ready to engage in learning.
Just quickly on that, just to say that one of the things we think about when it comes to parenting, if your child is, maybe not behaving in the most appropriate way, or you're trying to manage their behavior, is a term called hangry. A combination of being hungry and angry is always worse for children, because, obviously if you're not fed, then your mood is going to change. So I think that's a big link to what Catherine's talking about with the breakfast element.
We've just got 5 minutes left. Has anyone got any final questions? Mike?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how to use the hands up on the screen bit, but I'll revert to old technology. I mean, I think the assistance that you're giving to parents and children is amazing. One of the things, it picks up on what the point that Karen made, is that the referral times seem to be extending at the moment as a result of the pandemic, in terms of getting children referred into traditional services. How do you integrate with the traditional services? It seems like you're ploughing a lone furrow. And the other thing that I think came across very strongly to me was Hayley's comment that how much her child had benefited from the experience that she'd had in the primary school. Yet when she went to the secondary school, there was no desire to, it seems, even learn about PlaceToBe and the services that is offered. Is that as a result of the school, or is that a result of the sort of commercial pressures that you're experiencing in terms of rolling the program out to schools?
Well, I think it's important to say we're not ploughing a lone furrow. We have to integrate. This has to be integrated into more specialist provision. It's not about providing things isolated within the school. So as a key part of setting up in a school and in a service, identifying who the specialist agencies that we can refer into is a really, really important part of that. I think also coming back to, I'm slightly dismayed that at the response of a secondary school. However, it highlights the importance of school leader and the leadership within the school understanding what you can put in place and the importance of this. And then also investing in and investment going into services and support. And it doesn't have to be the PlaceToBe service. I think, whether it's a health professional, whether they recruit their own counsellor, they may have access to other local charities or organizations or the mental health support teams, but it's understanding what provision there is and then putting in place a whole school approach. And I think Lois asked earlier, what one thing could you push for? And I think the training for the designated mental health lead, which is part of the government's policy and implementation plans right now, getting that out and a commitment to that, being for all schools, training a designated mental health lead in every school. At the moment, it's just 1/3 of schools that can access that, but getting that out to all schools, because that provides the framework for every school to understand how you put this in place, and then to start to prioritize and choose the service for themselves. So I think that understanding at the leadership level within the school is really important, as well as investment in getting services into schools.
Judah, do you have any final thoughts on either something like the perfect school or where the investment should be? I was looking at figures the other day which showed that in the last 10 years, the relative resource going into schools has gone down. I'm not sure that's right, but that's the research I was shown, which is a real worry. In which case, how do you get more resource in? And you're kind of doing that, aren't you, with parents and with charities? We do that at Bromley by Bow. We bring in massive charitable resource to support actually health services. Any final thoughts from you, and then Hayley?
Yeah, I think that the investment is around involvement of parents and the community with the school, and then working together, because that is the resource that, there's this saying that says, we don't parent our children in isolation, we parent them in the community. And actually this community idea of parenting children is one that says, that we get access to support from a wider community, and that helps us to then plug the gaps that we might find that there are for needs for our children. And I think if we can invest in more of that, and actually there is a lot of resource in terms of parent expertise that I think can be plugged into. When I used to work in certain areas where we develop or deliver specific parenting programs, we would always encourage parents to then go on from that and almost complete, in their own community, engage in their own community, which then grew into terms of keeping the resource around what they learned, but also supporting each other, because we don't have that isolation mentality then, and then it's a sense of I can access other support through other people. And I think that if within schools there is more of that kind of investment, that parents are seen as part of that school community, and that's really built upon, I think actually we will find that there's a way of making up for some of those things that we can't actually access at the moment, because we'll be able to access it through the community. That's what I feel.
And Hayley, finally to you, as a parent, and as a governor.
I have to agree with what Catherine and Julia have said as well. I think that mental health, the earlier we start, the better it is, the outcomes. Sorry, I'm in the school at the moment, so you might hear the children in the background. Just to say, I've got a younger child who actually really suffered as a result of lockdown. She was in reception when lockdown happened. And as we emerged out and she came back into school, we noticed a change in behavior with regards to anger. She couldn't cope. If she got angry about something, it kind of boiled and she didn't know how to deal with it. And she's actually in PlaceToBe counselling at the moment. And her words to me when she came out, because I think she's only got a few more sessions left at the moment, she came out just before the half term, she said to me, just very soon I'll be better, just like my sister was. So I think that the earlier they start, we've noticed that she's able to cope with her anger, and she's calming down and she's socializing more and everything. And I think that was a direct result of what the pandemic did to the younger children. I just think that it needs to be, if not secondary schools, definitely in primary schools, because I think the earlier we catch it, as with my Hannah, the better it is outcome wise. As I said in previous, if PlaceToBe hadn't have been there, we don't know where we'd be today. We might have lost our child. She might have gone down a very dark route, and may not have come back.
So it just leaves for me to say, Catherine, Judah, Hayley, thank you so much. Hayley, in particular, a fantastic privilege for us all to hear your personal story. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And I'm sure emails, Mike will be very happy if emails flow to all of you with